this just a test or is this for real?
This is for real.
Oh, it's for real?
But we'll edit
Okay.
this part out.
Okay.
We need to
All
edit
right.
more.
All right.
So we are the Meandering Vegans, Lisa and Gary.
I'm more dressed up this time.
And today we have a guest, Ashleigh Mott, who I've been friends with for many years. We used to be in a group called Defending Animal Rights Today and Tomorrow. And currently, Ashleigh is a...
I'm a writer, and I actually blog on YouTube under the name Electric Mayhem 87 on my own channel, which will be linked below.
Okay.
Yep.
We're going to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and I make videos about veganism, about mental health, about talking about the dangers of the rising kind of hard right, and the issues with that, and just about anything that sparks my interest. On my blog, which is called Everyone Deserves Justice, which it approaches veganism from an intersectional perspective, and it's just kind of about justice for everyone, as the name implies. On that, I talk about veganism, animal rights, and also issues regarding mental health and education, and again, just about anything that sparks my interest.
And you're getting ready to go to school.
Yeah, I'm returning to my alma mater, University of Maryland at College Park, with the hopes of entering their sociology graduate program. I want to study sociology so that I can kind of investigate not just our systems of oppression that most people talk about, like racism, sexism, classism, ableism, things like that, but also how speciesism kind of interacts with those. I kind of want to introduce those ideas into academia, and my goal is to kind of use my education to help build a world that will be beyond those.
I think those of us who recognize this feel that that it doesn't matter who the victim is. The problem is that there's victimization occurring in whatever form, whether for profit or just out of, I don't know, spitefulness, I don't know. But the current climate with the hate groups is something that is calling a lot of attention for people who have not been aware of what's happening to marginalized groups. And so I think that one of the things that I think is a good idea right now is if we start viewing it as ending oppression altogether, and everyone who is fighting for any specific group or cause should not be harming members of other oppressed classes.
Definitely.
So I think one of the things that I'm frustrated about is how hard it is for white people to really understand. Like when I'm in conversations with white people, and I've had a hard time learning too. I've learned a lot over the past couple of years. You have a page to help white people be an ally, right?
I've talked about allyship in the past, both on my public page. I've reblogged articles on my blog, and also I have a video that I made a couple months ago about how allyship, the key thing to remember about allyship is that it's not about you. So I've talked about it and touched on it in some detail. Although a page about it does sound like a great idea.
What are some of the mistakes that people make when they are trying to be an ally?
I think a big mistake people make is, even really well-intended people, they make their allyship about them. Even like say white people who want to be ally to Black Lives Matter protesters, to Standing Rock, indigenous protesters, to any kind of people of color, they'll center their allyship around them and like their sensitivities and so forth. The same thing can happen with straight cis allies to the LGBTQ plus movement, and that was actually what kind of sparked my desire to make that video that I made.
How can people correct that? Because you do see even just a baseline sort of it's about me, especially online. I find that more online than in real life, but that's just my perception. Mm-hmm. And so part of the question is, how do you be a little more other-centered in general, and then how do you specifically be a little more other-centered, or whatever the best approach might be when you're trying to be an ally?
I think an important key thing is to kind of take a step back and be willing to listen to other people's perspectives. Like, for example, I'm a queer person, but I am not a trans person. So when it comes to trans issues, I will just take a step back and I will listen. I don't try to dominate the conversation, and I've taken a step back to think, what kind of transphobic things have I said in the past? What kind of transphobic things might I still think? Why do I think these things? Let me think about it. And I understand that people can be defensive about it because no one wants to think that they're a bigot or a bad person, but like, just reevaluating these things is just part of being a more reliable ally. And I've even seen conversations happen within the animal rights movement. There are activists who will make their animal rights activism about them, and that's a problem in and of itself.
Yeah, what I've seen, and this is a little bit of a stray, so even though we're meandering, I'm trying not to meander too much. I think I've seen people get a following and get popular, and they started off kind of humble, but the power kind of feeds their head, you know?
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question about, or some questions about intersectionality.
Oh,
and first of all, do we need to define that for the listeners?
Well,
Even
that's
though
a
we
good
have a
idea.
great,
Oh, yes.
we have a great set of listeners, but just in case.
Okay, intersectionality was first introduced by legal and critical race theory scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. It's a theory that proposes that different identities such as race, class, gender identity, sexuality. No, excuse me. Different identities like that. They intersect, and if you have a certain number of marginalized identities, they can intersect and they amplify each other. And I've explained this in certain ways in my videos. Like, for example, I'm a black woman and I'm queer and I have certain disabilities. So those intersect and amplify each other. But on the other hand, I also have privileged identities, such as being born into a certain class, not being transgender, having access to education because of my class status and so forth. So I try to make it clear to people that you can have privilege in some areas and still be marginalized in other areas. So it's not just black and white. There's victims and there's oppressors. That people are more complicated than that, and you can recognize that.
How can a knowledge of this intersection of oppression help advocacy for, supposing someone is primarily an animal rights advocate or is primarily an advocate for some marginal group of humans, how can this help them in their advocacy and help the people they're advocating for or the animals they're advocating for?
Well, it can affect the way you advocate your veganism to, well, the way you advocate veganism in general. For example, PETA is a great example of what not to do when it comes to advocating veganism. They've done a lot of stunts, and many of which have just gone out of their way to either alienate or talk down to marginalized groups of people, whether it's comparing certain events in history like black slavery or the Holocaust to factory farming, which even no matter what you think of it as a comparison, the fact is people do find it very jarring and just not very convincing. Or like, say, telling the people of Detroit who are in the midst of a water crisis that they'll pay their water bills if they go vegan for a month, like that kind of thing. That's not very effective activism. I actually came across this very excellent vegan starter kit it was a collaborative effort between Farm Sanctuary and By Any Greens Necessary, which is Tracy McWhorter's group. It was an African American vegan starter guide. I think it approached it in the best way. It advocated for veganism, but didn't like push it did promote the ethics, the health benefits, and the health benefits, and the environmental impact of meat, dairy, and eggs. It showed recipes that were really accessible and not super like mock meat and mock cheese heavy. They made it very accessible, and in addition to that, in the very back of the starter kit, they listed a bunch of different historical Black vegans, such as or like a lot of Black vegan history, such as Dick Gregory's book, and other things like that.
Right.
Well, how do you, I mean, when different human groups work together, the ones where I have been present, and there's, for instance, I went to march with the water protectors.
Yeah.
So the water protectors talked about their oppression by the white man, and then they invited African American people to get up and talk about their oppression by the white man.
Yeah.
So their common complaint was the white man. But how would I, as a vegan activist, participate in that? Because I think that the problem is I'm representing the group that's oppressed in the most numbers,
Mm-hmm.
but who isn't able to get up and speak for themselves. So I try to do my best to speak for them.
Mm-hmm.
So what would if I had been involved, first of all, if I'm there at a march, I think one of the problems would be if I just went to the march with the goal of getting up there on the stage.
Yeah.
And that's a bad thing. You shouldn't be using those other groups as a chance to speak.
Absolutely.
And that does happen a lot. I've made that mistake before. Not getting on stage, but going to events to try and reach those groups.
It's important that you recognize that too.
But at the same time, I have over the past 14 years done human rights actions,
Mm-hmm.
not to bring the animal rights message in, but just to do those actions. How do I get up and be a recognized member of that community or that effort and be able to speak for those who aren't human?
It's a really tough thing. I mean, it's a really tough thing. I mean, it's why it's so important to elevate the voices of vegans of color, because there are a lot of great Black vegan activists, a lot of great indigenous vegan activists who are speaking about these issues, who speak about environmental racism, how animal agribusiness pollutes water, how it wastes water that people need, and how it's, of course, a very cruel industry, and how it's not needed. That's why I think it's so important to amplify the voices of Black vegans, because, like, the truth is, to be quite blunt, yeah, a lot of Black and indigenous people don't want white people coming to talk down to them about animals, and of course that's not your intention, but that's the way a lot of them would take it.
Okay, so another thing that I keep seeing is that it keeps being limited to animal agriculture as a food-related issue. Mm-hmm. But 50% of the profit from cows who are farmed comes from their skins. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about when we're talking about these issues, we often talk about it just about food.
Yeah.
But materials also, and not just for clothing and shoes. Leather is in things as simple as a keychain or a book cover, all the way, and car seats, and it's everywhere.
Car seats, belts,
it's
wallets, all that.
Things that people do. And of course, the perception that the general population has is leather equals quality. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I was shopping for a car recently, and the car salesman proudly told me that they had a leather interior, and I said, I don't want any skin. I'm vegan. I want a car without skin in it. Mm-hmm. He said, skin? It's not skin. I said, leather is skin taken from a cow's body. And he said, but no, this isn't from cows. And apparently, they were calling synthetic leather. Mm. Because it sounds better to non-vegans.
Yes.
Although at least they were making synthetic leather. But yeah, it still has this perception of quality.
Yes, that's a question of cultural capital, which is something I've wanted to talk about on my channel for quite a while, since I came across an article while making a video response. Not an article. It was a research paper while making a video response to someone else that I really wanted to explore the concept of cultural capital. That might be worth it. Not only veganism and cultural capital might be something worth researching, but that kind of makes me think of how much, like, what was discussed in this research paper was that the person who wrote it was talking about how meat had become less of a status symbol since, say, World War II, when meat was scarcity, but now, since it's everywhere, people are finding cultural capital in like, quote-unquote ethical food that's not even necessarily always vegan, but it's fair trade, non-GMO, organic, all that stuff. But the idea of animals being used as clothing is still a form of cultural capital, if not being used as food. So that would definitely be something worth looking into.
And one thing I should have said earlier too, and I would like to ask you to put this into better words for me, is that no one should expect you to be the voice for all black people, all women, and you know, like, isn't that an issue? That,
yes, I can't be that, because, like, it's so hard for me to even be a voice just for me, because anyone who's followed my channel or my work with any regularity knows how sporadic I am about it, because I'm just, it's not even because I don't care about it, because I do. I have had so many great ideas that have just never come to fruition, but I just get so overwhelmed by just life stuff and everything. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I'm so overwhelmed with even the stuff I want to talk about that I can't just take on more.
It would be a lot of pressure for anybody. Like, I can't, like, whenever someone asks, well, how do women feel about such and such, I really don't know. Because I don't think that I often think that I give an answer that's not the typical woman's answer.
Yeah, it's like you can only speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wrestling with the same thing. You know, the last thing I want to do is tokenize, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
And at the same time, realize that you're a member of a group, and sometimes you have to be a member of the group that's targeted to really understand that perspective. Mm-hmm. So we'll have other guests on that are in various groups, and we hope over time that we'll get sort of a spectrum.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure that'll happen.
It all leads to that. Let me ask you this, and really both of you. I've seen sometimes online where people are less inhibited. It's almost like a kind of reverse appropriation. They'll say, well, people of color aren't ready for you to talk to them about veganism because they've got other problems. Now, there are other problems. There's other isms of which they're the target. But on the other hand, when I speak about veganism with someone who's black or white, I don't sense any difference in interest and grasping the ideas and compassion for animals. So my thinking is that it's an insincere sort of allyship that's just at that moment because they're not vegan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I see it all the time. People talk about, especially on Twitter, I see people, like, shaming vegans for saying, oh, they'll say to vegans, oh, poor people and people of color and disabled people, they can't always go vegan. I'm just like, I'm under the poverty line, I'm a person of color, and I'm disabled. And and I'm not the only one. I follow a ton of other vegans of color on Twitter, on Tumblr, on Facebook, all over the place. It's like we can speak up for ourselves. We can raise our own voices. I do find it very condescending.
Yeah, so do I. Now, on the other hand, I mean, there are food deserts. And,
Yes,
yeah.
I've made videos about like the real life issues that do exist, and I link people to pro-vegan groups that do talk about these things. There's Food Empowerment Project, there's Chili's on Wheels, there's Food Not Bombs. These are all really great organizations you can check out to learn about food justice issues, to donate money to. It's more worthwhile than donating to PETA, to volunteer with. You probably have a chapter of Food Not Bombs in your area, or you could start one, or Chili's on Wheels you might even have, or you could start one.
I love Chili's on Wheels.
Oh, yes.
And Food Empowerment Project. I'd love to get people from both of them on the show. Now, in my head, on the way over, I was thinking of complaints and criticisms that I have seen online, and I know you've seen them, but since we're talking about it, and I'm only the messenger here, I wanted to relay some of those and we can discuss, if that seems like a good time to do it. One of the criticisms that I hear, and I don't know exactly where people are coming from, and they may be coming from different places, is, well, animals are already the most oppressed group. I don't want to dilute what I'm doing by spending time advocating for humans. You've probably heard that one too.
Yes, I have from some very prominent vegans. Vegans I won't name because I've made videos about that. What I would say to that is the reality is that people are still struggling in this world, and veganism is supposed to be about compassion, and human beings, whether you like it or not, are animals too. Furthermore, I definitely recommend the book Aphorism, because Afko and her sister, they write a bit about how issues like racism are actually intersected with speciesism, and they actually talk about this in an interesting way, because they write about how even something like slavery was justified because these Europeans just excuse slavery by saying, well, these African people are subhuman, so we can treat them just like we treat our cattle. And even Angela Davis, who is vegan too, she wrote Women, Race, and Class, and even the way she described how female African enslaved women were treated, the way she described it sounded just like how people treat, say, dairy cows as just birthing machines and for creating new slaves, basically.
And while you were talking, I was thinking, maybe you can help me out here. There are these parallels in terms of, like, excuses given,
right,
techniques used to depersonalize the victims.
For sure.
And how do we talk about those, which I think it can be effective, but you don't want to fall into the traps that we were talking about earlier, where it's sort of a crass appropriation.
You have to be very, very careful. For example, I don't think that would have worked if it was a book written by two white sisters.
Right.
I definitely, Afko and Silco, they put it a lot better than I can, so I definitely recommend their book and checking out their blog, Black Vegans Rock, because they put it more eloquently than I can. And I understand how it can be, how it could be, like, misappropriated, and, like, it's tricky, you know. It depends on who it comes from, I guess.
When I do my activism, mm-hmm. I present veganism as a social justice issue. Mm-hmm. I do not talk about human health in the beginning. I will talk. I mean, human health is a side benefit to the dietary aspects of veganism. And if I'm talking to someone who is expressing concern in that, I need to be able to have that conversation. But that's not how I present veganism in the beginning. I start as a social justice issue, and I think that the most basic way that all of this is common, is someone with power using their power to subjugate someone else with the excuse that they are different from us.
Mm-hmm.
And when you break down into they and us, then I think that's where a lot of trouble begins, just, sociologically too.
Yeah.
But it gives power to these people who, when you tell someone that they are a member of us,
Mm-hmm.
they feel safe, and whatever happens to them is not a danger. So I think that comes into part of the problem with white violence in the United States with the white supremacists and such, is that the dominant group of white people don't feel at risk, so they aren't typically called terrorists. And right now the white supremacists are calling those who fight against them terrorists. They're calling Antifa terrorists. And I wonder if you have an opinion about Antifa too, but I think that's a powerful word. And technically speaking, these people are terrorists, the white supremacists, and there's lots of different white supremacist groups,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them you wouldn't recognize wearing suits and ties. I did a protest with a group several years ago at Freedom Plaza, where we just were for the rally last weekend, of a suit and tie group of white supremacists at the Reagan building there, and we were outside protesting them. Like, you wouldn't know to look at them that's what they are, but they're in all walks of life. They're in all professions. Yeah. They're attracted to positions of power. And so the general public is not feeling concerned about that because they don't feel a danger because they're a part of us. And everybody who's a part of them is not being heard, basically.
Yeah, it's like, when you look at Richard Spencer, like, being interviewed, I can understand why people want to interview him for, like, I will never understand it, because why do we platform neo-Nazis, but, like, in a way, I see how it can be appealing, because he smiles so nicely, and he wears his little suits and ties, and nicely talks about how they want a peaceful ethnic cleansing. It's like, yes, he puts on this nice face and smiles so he doesn't look scary. But if you actually if you're a person like me who isn't won over by niceness, whatever that means this week, easily, and you actually listen to what he's saying, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's almost more chilling when they're so calm about it.
Yes. And when he basically is told a black British man to his face, "You're not British," it's just like, excuse you.
So, I'm curious about your opinion of Antifa.
Antifa, well, I get so annoyed when people talk about Antifa like it's just this monogamous, not monogamous, and
monolithic?
Monolithic,
yeah.
Thank you. Monogamous is something entirely different. Monolithic organization, when it's not even an organization, it's an adjective, if anything, for, like, to describe any anti-fascist movement, person, So I don't have any hard feelings toward Antifa. I feel like we live in a country where the President of the United States comes on TV and says that actual neo-Nazis are some very fine people, and it's kind of, when it gets to that point, it's like, yes, this is kind of a crisis situation. People, no shit, people are freaking out.
Yeah. Well, okay, so when the general public hears the word Antifa, they're thinking about people who are dressed in black and throwing things and maybe doing some property destruction. And I think it's weird that the fact that people are so concerned about that is strange to me when they're fighting a group that has the protection of the police.
Right.
When Antifa goes out to do it, when people who attend something under the name of anti-fascism, if they're fighting fascists and they're in a part of that group where you would look and say, okay, they're wearing all the black clothes and they've got the banner and they've got the no KKK. Okay, when those people are taking action, not only are they having to deal with police attacking them and trying to arrest them, but they're dealing with the white supremacists also. And the white supremacists try to form it as a speech issue. It's not a speech issue. They are violent. You don't talk with guns and knives and bombs. And they've set bombs not that long ago. They've killed people. So this is the type of people they're fighting. And these people have the support of the police. Kessler comes in with police escort.
It's the whole free speech thing that the white supremacists and the fascists and neo-Nazis use. It's just a gaslighting tactic. They don't care about it.
Right.
Spencer has gone on record saying he doesn't care about free speech.
Oh, really?
Yes,
If
yes.
they did care about it, they would care about it for everybody, and they would care about everybody's right to live.
Right.
One thing that I saw a lot of on social media, and everyone's, seen this, is complaints about unruly behavior at Black Lives Matter events. And tell me if this thinking makes any sense. If you look at something in isolation, yes, you can say, you shouldn't have broken that car's window or something like that. But I go back, I'm a little disjointed here. I go back to the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah.
And whites were shocked that so many people of color were glad that O.J. was, got off to the degree that he did.
Yeah.
And so if you start with the premise that whites and blacks are the same,
Right.
that we both have the same degree of good and bad qualities, if an entire group is feeling frustration, then there must be a good reason for it. Because if that's not your premise, then you're saying they're inferior. Does that make
Yes,
saying-
yes. That makes perfect sense. It's like, but like people don't have that mindset about black people. It's like they might. It's like a lot of people might say they do, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people carry around the attitude of, I would sympathize with Black Lives Matter if they weren't so angry all the time. It's just like, no shit, they're angry.
Are we supposed to not be angry after
Children.
hundreds of years of...
It's like children are being killed in the streets. It's like, and like, where was All Lives Matter? Between when America was colonized till now.
Right?
I mean, in a way, you could say they showed enormous restraint.
Yeah.
Because look at everything that's happened,
Exactly.
over several hundred years. Really.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't quieted down to the point where you wouldn't be angry. Let me ask you, I'm jumping around a little bit.
Okay,
but,
yeah, we're meandering, remember?
That's right. That's our charter. So another concern that I hear voiced frequently about intersectionality
Yeah.
is that, well, okay, I'm already vegan,
Okay.
and I'll support some Native or African American or what have you event or donate, blah, 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 but they're not vegan, so it's asymmetrical, and why should I help them if they're not vegan? You probably, seen that a lot.
I have a hard time when I participate with other groups because I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with people who, the group I'm representing, their body parts are in their stomachs or on their body. It hurts me.
I think it's something to remember, a very important thing to remember is that almost none of us who live, especially in the United States, but in like North America in general, almost none of us were raised vegan. We're all, it's just like how we're raised in a society that favors whiteness, that favors maleness, that favors straightness, cisness, able-bodiedness, people of a certain class. We live in a speciesist society. It's like, so this is normalized. Like, not being vegan is normalized. I wasn't totally vegan until I was 23 years old. It's like, and so I have to think to myself, was I just a terrible monster for the first 23 years of my life, even after I knew what went on? And it's just like, no, I wasn't. It's just, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I was, at a certain point, I was ready. It's like, and yeah, there are people who just don't know. There are people who aren't in the right frame of mind to be ready, or what have you. It's like, so, that's one thing to remember.
I have been active recently, and I know some people from who march under the banner of Antifa, and when I've talked about veganism, one of my friends said, until humans are all have justice and equality, they're not going to even think about it. And I eventually realized the response that I should have, and I eventually said to this person, ending your exploitation of other animals doesn't take any time away from fighting for human groups, and not only does it not hurt those struggles, it actually helps those struggles.
Right.
And I think that kind of resonated with them. I think they heard me. I don't know that they're going to make many positive changes. I mean, they do some things, but so I kind of feel like that got through to them. Another person who I met said they used to be vegan, but they were so tired they had a lot of bad experiences with vegans, and I said, you know, veganism is the only social justice cause for members who can't speak for themselves, and unfortunately they're depending on the oppressor class to speak for them, and we don't always do the best job, and I said that they don't deserve to suffer for that.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to talk about, I'll get to that in a minute. I think a lot of leftists have a bit of a hard time, like, with veganism, which is unfortunate. My two friends, or my two, like, internet friends, Mexi and a Marine of A Privileged Vegan, the YouTube channel, they actually have a podcast called The Vegan Vanguard, and one episode they did was about why leftists should be vegan. I was thinking of making a video about that topic, and
that would be nice.
Yeah, I might make it. It might be like a weekend thing. It's gonna be hard, like when I go back to school, because I'll probably have a job on campus. But another thing I wanted to talk about was like the whole idea of like the voiceless. Like I've been reading like all these articles about like how vegans shouldn't say we're voices for the voiceless. Because the truth of the matter is that animals do have voices. They use their voices, but the thing is that they're ignored.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many times have you seen videos of cows running after their calves, screaming for their calves? Like, that's heartbreaking. Like, chickens screaming when they're being heard, and all that. Like, even